YouTube channel, Photomatic. In this channel, we talk about photography and nothing else than photography. The technique of taking a good photograph and how do you edit those images in your post processing. We talk a lot about this. So in this video, if we are going to talk about particular one subject, how to capture a good sunset or sunrise image in your mobile camera. So many of us may be facing some problems. How to get a decent good image of a sunset or sunrise through your mobile camera? Because the dynamic range is so high that you're just wondering whether you keep the shadow perfect or you keep the highlight perfect. So the exposure really matters at that time of sunset or sunrise situation when the dynamic range is very high. And if you wonder what is the dynamic range and how can I solve the problem, how can I take a good sunrise or sunset photograph with my mobile phone only, and how to edit those images, this video is just for you. So this is a two-part video. In this very first part, I am going to talk about the technique I used to apply when I am in the field with my mobile phone taking a decent sunrise or sunset photograph. And the second part of this video I will show you how to edit those images in simple photo processing software, Lightroom, Photoshop, etc. So without any further delay, let's roll the camera. Let's see what is the technique I usually applied to get a decent sunset or sunrise photograph through my mobile camera. In today's video, we are going to talk about how to capture a beautiful sunset or sunrise image by your mobile phone. So, for this demonstration purpose, I will be using Adobe Lightroom. Why taking a sunset or sunrise picture is always a big issue with a mobile phone. Let me why it happens and what is the counter fix of that. Let me show you that first. What is the problem? Now, if you can see, this is my first image. Okay. Now, see what has happened that in this particular image, as you can see, all my, the shadow means this portion is my shadow. The foreground is acting, or you can call it a shadow portion, and this background is my highlights. Okay. So as you can see, my foreground, my grass, roads are properly exposed, but in the highlight segment where the sun was setting, it's completely blown out. So why does it happen this way? The primary reason behind is that the exposure is good, is okay with the foreground, means for this shadow portion, but the exposure for the highlight segment is much higher. If you look at this particular histogram, let me take it on the development mode so that you can understand it properly. So, if you just look at this histogram, you will find that in the histogram, the left side of this histogram represent our darkest tones or our shadows. In the right hand side represent the brighter tones or our highlights. As you can see in this particular image, our highlight is crashing down in the very right side of the graph. So that means For the highlights, if you touch it in Lightroom, you can see there is a warning going on. Okay, this shows where the highlight clipping occurs. What is highlight clipping? Highlight clipping is when you expose your highlights in a manner that it no longer the information can be you know taken back from the image. It's called highlight bar or highlight clipping. Now let me show you. Now when you are doing a edit of this image, you probably thought that, well, I have already overexposed my image a much higher way. Can I just bring my exposure down so that I can adjust it? Let's try it first. Go to this basic panel, just drag down the exposure in the left hand side. So we are bringing the exposure down. But see, it is affecting in this area, but it is making it this particular right hand segment completely white. Why so? Because although there is no more highlight clipping to show you, because the right hand side is much free now, but the information that was captured by your mobile phone or your camera has already lost. You cannot recover those information. You cannot get back those information that was actually not captured. So what is the way out? Let me go to the next image for so this is my next image. As you can see, in this image is actually, you may call a inverse or reverse of the previous image. Why I am calling this way? Let me adjust my Lightroom first a little. Okay. Now it's pretty open right now. Okay. So why I'm calling the second image as an inverse or as an inverse or reverse of this particular first image? Because in this first image, I have shown you, although the shadow was properly exposed, we can find a lot of information in the shadow segment, but in the highlight segment, we have information lost. So we cannot recover those information. So in this particular first image, we have an issue in the highlight segment, but we do not have any issue in the shadow segment. Now, if we go to the second image, now you will find that eventually that now the highlights means the sky or the background is nicely exposed. You do not see any kind of clipping in the highlight segment, means the right segment. So there is no unnecessary brighter luminance areas in this image. But what happened? That the shadow segment is now underexposed. So this portion is completely underexposed. Why this? Because the because the reason is that our mobile phone camera dynamic range is not that much of high. Okay, even if you're shooting with a DSLR, you can find this kind of difficulties in a high dynamic range. What do we mean by high dynamic range? Dynamic range means the difference between your brightest point and your darkest point. Means the difference between this point and verify this point. So this image has a huge dynamic range. Okay. So if you move your exposure, go for the higher exposure, then what will happen? For as of the first image, your highlights will be blown up. And if you go for this image, then your shadow will be more in darker tones. Okay. So you don't want it, right? But this is eventually happens at the time of taking any sunset or sunrise image, because at the time of sunset and sunrise, the sky is much more, you know, luminate much more brighter than your ground subjects. So there is a huge difference in luminance, means in brightness, there is a huge difference. Okay, so you may wonder, then what will be my way out? Well, there is a technique called exposure blending. So I'm not going to that path, or I will not talk about that thing, because exposure blending needs at least a tripod, right? But when you are moving around or roaming around, you don't have the luxury to carry a tripod everywhere. So if you have a tripod, you put your mobile or DSLR in those tripods, and you can take two exposure shots and blend them. That's called exposure blending. In another video, I will talk about the exposure blending, but I'm not directing towards that path right now. So, see, think that I do not have any tripod with me. So, what is my way out? The way out is, don't do this or don't do that also. Go for a picture like Pathat picture. As you can see, now if you look at this histogram, my highlights are well kept. My shadows are, comparing to the highlights, my shadows are more or less exposed. Okay, not that much of finely exposed, but I can say, or you can say that it is okay, right? So take this kind of image. But for that, what you need to do is that whenever you are taking a sunset or sunrise image, remember one thing: you need to keep the highlight intact. Shadows can be recovered in a bit, or you know, shadows can get light. But what I mean by that, let me show you first. Let's bring the first one. So here is our first image. As you can see, we do not have much light in the shadow or in the foreground segment, right? But we can bring it. How to do it? Go to the develop module of Lightroom. Okay, I know, there is a highlight barring is going on. Okay, but it's okay because it's sun, right? So highlight, you cannot keep the sun, uh, it will eventually burn the image. But look how small the burn is right now. If you go to this image, you can see the highlight clipping is much higher, much higher. But if you go to this image, the highlight clipping is just a tiny little bit over here. Okay. Now what we can do is that to bring this image in live, we need to put some, light over this shadow portion. So I am doing in this process in Lightroom. You can use your any editor of your life, like you can use Adobe Photoshop or Affinity Photo Editor or whatever editor you actually prefer or you have. Right? So do one thing. Bring this exposure a little bit. Always look for the histogram. Whenever you are doing anything on an image, always care for the histogram. So I will just increase my exposure a tiny bit. I have to be extremely careful because I don't want to blow my highlights. Okay, I think it will work for me a tiny bit more. It could, right? Now go to the shadow segment. Increase the shadow slider. Okay, so it will bring look at this histogram. Now the histogram is shifting towards more and more right hand side. Means our shadow, which was in the darker tones, are getting light. So you can recover the shadow in this manner. You can recover a certain portion of the shadow or information from the darker tones. But always remember, you cannot do the same thing with the highlights. Means as I already showed you, if you even you have
just bring down the exposure a quite bit. Our histogram is showing nothing is there, but it is still remain white because the information that we were looking for or we want to bring from the highlights is not even captured by our mobile phones or our DSLR. So that is a very important thing to remember in case you have encountered a sunset or sunrise situation. Make sure you are exposing properly for the highlights, then focus on the shadow shift. Shadows can be recovered, but if the highlight was washed out already, it cannot be recovered in any post processing with any kind of editor, because the reason is that if the highlight was blurred, it means that the information was lost. The information is never in that particular image. You cannot bring those missing information and put it on your image. So this is how you may want to take a good sunrise and sunset photograph by your mobile or DSLR when you do not have any tripod associated with you. In the next video tutorial, we'll talk how to process a sunset or sunrise image to get some decent photograph out of it.
Thank you friends for watching the video. Hope you like it. If you like it, then please click the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the bell icon to get a regular notification. If you love the video, please comment, do share. Your support is very appreciated. Wait for the second part of this video where I am going to show you how to edit these images to get a breathtaking sunset or sunrise image. Thank you.